Welcome to the Urban Herald. We're about to embark on an exhaustive analysis of, well, what has to be aviation history's most enduring mystery.
Absolutely. It's a story that involves a true pioneer, a perfect storm of technical failure, and just the vast, unyielding Pacific Ocean.
We are, of course, talking about the 1937 disappearance of Amelia Earhart.
It's a story that, it just instantly transformed from the celebration of human potential into an almost mythological riddle.
Yeah.
On July 2nd, 1937, Earhart and her master navigator, Fred Noonan, they vanished. Gone. During their attempt to circumnavigate the globe at its widest point.
And for nearly 9 decades, it feels like every search, every new clue, every new piece of technology has been aimed at solving that single moment of silence.
It's a constant search for an answer.
So, as part of the Urban Herald research team, we have compiled an extraordinary stack of sources for this deep dive. I mean, everything from the official U.S. Navy operational records to the latest forensic analysis from TIGAR.
And crucially, the intelligence documents newly declassified in 2025. That's a huge piece of this.
It is. Our mission today, and this is specifically for you, the listener, is to give you a clean, clear roadmap through all the noise. We need to distinguish between the cold, hard facts of the accident.
The technical failures that really sealed their fate.
And then the 3 major competing theories that try to explain what happened after they ran out of sky.
Right, and we have to begin with the anchor fact. The one piece of data that every serious investigator, no matter which theory they prefer, must start and end with.
Okay.
This is the data point that connects the aircraft to all the potential crash sites. The final confirmed transmission from Earhart at 8:43 a.m. local time.
And she said,
"We are on the line 157337.
Wait, let's unpack that for a second before moving on, because that phrase, 157337, it's more than just a coordinate, right? It sounds like a line of possibility. What exactly is a line of position, an LOP, in 1930s navigation?
That's such a critical distinction. It is not a GPS point, it's a celestial navigation calculation. So Noonan, by observing the sun, or a star with a sextant, would have determined its altitude relative to the horizon.
Right.
This observation, when you cross-reference it with pre-calculated tables and the exact time, it determines a circle on the Earth where they could be. The LOP, the line, is just a tiny segment of that massive circle.
So he was telling the ship, the USCGC Itasca.
He was confirming to them that he knew his orientation relative to Howland Island, but he didn't yet know how far along that line he was. That was the missing piece.
So if the Itasca had been able to talk back to them, they would have used radio direction finding to send a signal.
Exactly. And the intersection of the Itasca's bearing and Earhart's LOP would have given them their precise location.
But because they could only transmit that one line, that LOP, the entire Western Pacific, stretching hundreds of miles in 2 directions, suddenly became a search zone.
Precisely. That line, 157 degrees on one end, 337 on the other, is the fixed geometrical constraint. It governs every single theory we're going to discuss today. It tells us where they were facing, but not where they landed.
So to truly understand the gravity of the disappearance, you have to recognize that Amelia Earhart was not just some footnote in a history book.
No, not at all.
She was a global celebrity, a symbol for millions, especially for women who were watching her just push against the limitations of the era.
That is absolutely essential context.
Yeah.
I mean, Earhart, born in 1897, she grew up in a world where women's societal roles were incredibly strictly defined. Yet she actively cultivated an image and a career that just defied those norms. When she first went up in an airplane in 1920, she reportedly knew instantly that she had to fly. It wasn't just a hobby for her. It was an imperative.
And her rise was, it was meteoric. Her first great achievement, becoming the first woman to fly solo across the Atlantic in 1932, that just solidified her position.
It did. The sources show she was celebrated globally. She received the Distinguished Flying Cross, an honor almost unheard of for a civilian, let alone a woman, at that time.
These achievements weren't just about speed or distance, were they? They were political statements.
Oh, absolutely. She went on to complete the first solo Pacific flight, navigating all the way from Hawaii to California. She became a co-founder of the 99s, an organization for female pilots that's still around today.
Right.
She actively wore trousers, which was a rebellious statement at the time, and she leveraged her fame to challenge gender roles in every single public appearance.
So when she planned this 1937 world flight, it wasn't just another stunt, it was the ultimate statement.
It was the capstone.
She sought to be the first female pilot to circumnavigate the globe, and specifically following the equatorial route, which is the longest and most challenging path possible.
This wasn't just about aviation. It was about securing her permanent status as an icon of empowerment.
The audacity of that goal required groundbreaking technology, which I guess leads us to the plane itself.
The Lockheed Electra 10E Special, tail number NR16020. This was not a standard off-the-shelf aircraft. It was completely bespoke.
It was essentially the most advanced non-military transport plane available in the mid-1930s.
Right. A twin-engine, all-metal monoplane, capable of carrying the massive fuel load required for these transoceanic legs.
And it was custom-built with financing from Purdue University, so it was effectively a flying research lab.
And what made it so state-of-the-art was the instrumentation. It boasted features like constant speed propellers and, notably, the Sperry gyropilot, the autopilot.
Which was crucial.
Absolutely crucial, because that system could maintain a precise, steady heading over thousands of miles of open ocean. This wasn't just a comfort feature, it was a navigational requirement.
It freed up the navigator.
It freed Noonan, who needed to spend hours making these complex calculations looking at stars and the sun, from the exhausting task of manually steering the plane.
But the best technology in the world is useless without the human expertise to manage it, which brings us to the other star of this endeavor, Fred Noonan.
And he was not a sidekick. The sources make it crystal clear he was considered one of the foremost navigators of his time.
A master of his craft.
That's right. Noonan was a professional master. He built his reputation charting the treacherous early commercial routes for Pan American Airways across the Pacific, the famous Great Circle routes.
Wow.
He specialized in celestial navigation and dead reckoning, calculating position based on speed, time, known currents. His reputation was impeccable. Earhart brought him on precisely because he was supposed to make the impossible navigational challenge of finding Howland Island manageable.
So you got the revolutionary aircraft and the master navigator.
The dream team.
They'd already completed 22,000 of the 29,000 total miles, successfully traversing 3 continents, 2 oceans. They get to Lae, New Guinea, exhausted, but ready for the final critical leg.
And that final leg was, without question, the make-or-break segment of the entire trip.
Lae to Howland Island.
A 20-hour flight covering 2,556 miles of just uninterrupted ocean. I mean, think about that challenge. They were relying on 1930s technology and human eyesight to find a target that is almost absurdly small.
Tell us again about Howland Island, because it's hard to overstate just how insignificant this place is.
Howland Island is a flat coral atoll. It is 1.5 miles long, half a mile wide, and it rises a scant 20 feet above sea level. It is, by all descriptions, a speck.
A needle in a haystack.
It's less than that. In modern terms, without GPS, without precision radar, finding Howland Island after 20 hours of flying over featureless ocean is like trying to hit a golf ball into a bucket from 5 miles away, using only a sundial for aiming.
Wow.
The margin for error was functionally zero. They needed Noonan's navigation to be perfect, and they needed reliable radio contact with the USCGC Itasca to guide them in during those final frantic hours.
And this is where we move from that inspiring ambition to the harsh reality of 1930s aviation limits. The deep dive into our sources makes it just abundantly clear. The Disappearance hinges on a catastrophic combination of communication failure,
Compounded by navigational vulnerabilities, it was a cascade of failures.
Let's unpack that one-way communication breakdown first.
This is the central tragedy of the whole thing. And the newly declassified 2025 Itasca radio logs, they definitively confirm it. The Electra was equipped with a robust radio suite for the time.
A Western Electric Model 13C transmitter and a Model 20B receiver.
Right, and they had frequencies planned, 3,105 kilohertz and 6,210 kilohertz for direct communication and for homing.
But what the sources reveal is this heartbreaking paradox. The Itasca could hear Earhart perfectly, but she could not hear them at all.
Exactly. The Itasca repeatedly logged her signals as QSA-5, which in radio speak means maximum strength and perfect readability.
So they knew she was close.
They knew she was close, but they couldn't send her the crucial radio direction finding, the RDF bearings, that would have brought her straight to them. It was a communication shouting match, where only one side had a functioning microphone.
So why? Why did her reception fail? This goes back to the hardware, specifically the antenna, right?
It does. The Electra relied on a high-frequency V-type antenna, about 46 feet long, which was great for transmitting power over long distances.
But not for receiving.
But for receiving weaker signals, especially homing beacons, the plane also relied on a specific low-frequency antenna, often called the belly antenna, which extended from the underside of the fuselage.
And this is where that March 1937 emergency landing in Hawaii becomes so critical?
Correct. The Electra suffered a really severe ground-looping incident at Luke Field, Hawaii, during the first attempt to fly east.
Right.
Now, while the main structural damage was repaired, our sources strongly suggest that the fragile belly antenna, which was critical for receiving the low-frequency homing beacon, that the Itasca was continuously transmitting on 500 kilohertz.
It was probably damaged.
It was likely snapped off or severely damaged and just not properly replaced or repaired before the flight continued. A catastrophic oversight.
So if the Itasca was whispering directions on that low frequency, the Electra's broken antenna couldn't pick it up. Even if their main transmitter was working perfectly for them to shout, "We on the line, 157-337."
That is the perfect analogy. They were effectively flying blind into that final stage of the search, reliant only on Noonan's dead reckoning and his celestial navigation.
That one technical failure meant Noonan's performance had to shift from masterful to miraculous.
And that's an unfair burden to place on any navigator, no matter how good they are.
Which leads us directly into the other layers of navigational difficulty they faced, even if the radio had been working.
Right.
Noonan's celestial navigation using his sextant and almanac should have gotten them within about 62 nautical miles of Howland. But the sources point to two compounding factors that completely undermined his efforts.
First, a foundational error. Cartographic inaccuracy. It sounds unbelievable today, but the charts used aboard the Electra, the very maps Noonan relied on to plot his destination, actually showed Howland Island misplaced by about 5 nautical miles from its true position.
5 miles doesn't sound like a lot, but when you're looking for a 1.5-mile-long island in cloudy conditions or at dusk.
It means that even if Noonan executed a perfect 20-hour flight, calculating his position to within a mile of where the chart said the island was, he would still miss the actual island by 4 miles.
It's a systemic, built-in error they never knew they were fighting against.
Exactly. And then you add the second, deeply human element, the international dateline theory. This addresses the extreme fatigue Noonan was under.
He'd been flying for almost a full day at this point.
This theory, which modern historians and navigators have explored, it addresses how complex time adjustment is when you're crossing the international dateline during a celestial sight.
Right, you need the exact time and date.
Precisely. Celestial navigation requires that precise knowledge to determine star and sun positions. If Noonan, after 17 hours airborne and likely fighting chronic fatigue, failed to adjust his calculation for the calendar date change when he was deriving his LOPs, it would introduce a systematic error.
And what would that error look like on a map geographically?
It would systematically shift all of his subsequent calculations westward. The estimated magnitude of that kind of mistake could place them 60 to 100 miles west of their intended track.
So you combine a 60-mile human error with the 5-mile chart error.
And the probability of finding that tiny island just vanishes entirely.
So they couldn't hear the directions, the map was slightly wrong, and the navigator was potentially suffering from exhaustion-induced error. But nothing is as unyielding as the physics of the aircraft itself.
The brutal mathematics of fuel.
Yes.
This is the ticking clock that defined that final hour. The sources detailed 2 devastating performance penalties the Electra suffered on that specific leg. First, a crucial, unforecasted headwind.
How strong.
They were fighting a persistent 26-mile-per-hour headwind across the entire flight path.
That's significant.
It is catastrophic. It extended the effective distance they had to cover. Instead of planning for 2,556 miles, the headwind meant they functionally had to fly nearly 3,100 miles. That's an extra 544 miles of distance that the fuel tanks were never designed to manage.
And the second penalty was the heavy payload they were carrying.
Right. They were carrying as much fuel as they possibly could, plus extra cargo, which meant the Electra was significantly heavier than optimal for cruising. This weight penalty increased their fuel consumption by roughly 20% above the planned calculations.
So high consumption rates, coupled with the headwind.
It severely degraded their range.
So let's bring this all back to that final transmission at 8:43 a.m.
By that point, they had been airborne for 20 hours and 13 minutes. Meticulous calculations based on their known performance and consumption rates suggest that they had perhaps only 30 to 90 minutes of effective flying time remaining.
That's nothing.
They were completely out of margin. If they didn't find the island immediately upon reaching their calculated position, they were going down, period.
The technical analysis and the fuel reality we've just reviewed, They provide the overwhelming mathematical support for the first, and still official, narrative.
The crash and sink theory.
Right. Given their proximity to Howland and their dwindling fuel, the logical conclusion reached back in 1937 was that they just ditched and sank.
Immediately after that final transmission, the U.S. government mobilized. It was, up to that point, the most expensive and comprehensive air-sea search operation in American history.
They brought out the big guns.
They deployed the aircraft carrier USS Lexington, which was a state-of-the-art vessel at the time, alongside destroyers and Coast Guard cutters like the Itasca.
And they searched a massive area, 250,000 square miles of the Central Pacific.
Absolutely unprecedented effort involving 4,000 personnel. But despite the massive scale, the ultimate result was zero.
No wreckage, no oil slick, no life raft, no remains.
Nothing. So by 1939, facing this complete lack of evidence, the U.S. Navy officially concluded that Earhart and Noonan had run out of fuel, ditched approximately 100 miles from Howland Island, and perished at sea.
And this remains the bedrock belief among many professional aviators and accident investigators, people like retired Captain Elgin Long, who champion this theory based purely on the hard math.
Long's work is compelling because it ignores all the speculation and focuses solely on the aircraft's performance envelope. He argues, based on the documented headwinds and high consumption, that the Electra simply did not possess the physics required to reach any alternative destination after 8:43 a.m.
The fuel calculations are just unforgiving.
Totally. And, crucially, the Electra was a land plane. It was not designed for sea operations.
So it wouldn't float for long.
That's the critical factor. The twin-engine, all-metal monoplane would have had minimal buoyancy. Upon ditching in the open sea, the fuselage would have rapidly flooded through the windows, door seals, engine nacelles. It would sink quickly, likely within minutes, straight to the ocean floor, which in that area descends to depths of 16,000 to 20,000 feet.
The conclusion is neat, then. Technical failure led to navigational uncertainty, which led to fuel exhaustion, an inevitable ditching, and a rapid sinking near the last known position.
It is the most mathematically probable explanation. However, it faces one enormous, unyielding empirical challenge.
The complete, enduring absence of evidence.
Exactly. If the plane sank in a relatively constrained and defined area near Howland, why, after 87 years of repeated searches, have we not found a single piece of the all-metal fuselage?
The technology exists now to find it, doesn't it? We're not talking about 1930s sonar anymore.
Far from it. We now deploy cutting-edge synthetic aperture sonar and unmanned vehicles like the Kongsberg Discovery Hughes 6000, which can scan the seafloor at extreme depths with incredible resolution.
We've found other wrecks.
Modern expeditions have successfully located World War II wrecks, including aircraft, in far less likely locations.
Which leads us to the highly publicized 2024 Deep Sea Vision expedition. They were specifically targeting that official crash zone.
That expedition was a potent demonstration of just how difficult this is. They scanned over 5,200 square miles of the Pacific floor, specifically looking for anomalies. And they generated international excitement when their sonar identified an object.
An object shaped like an airplane.
Distinctly shaped like an airplane fuselage, seemingly lying at 16,000 feet.
Everyone thought, this is it, the mystery is solved, didn't they?
They did, for a moment. But when they brought the high-resolution imaging to bear on it, the object was confirmed to be nothing more than a rock formation.
Just a geological feature.
A feature mimicking the shape of wreckage. This setback, despite using revolutionary technology, it underscores the sheer complexity and expense of confirming a deep-sea crash site, especially when the target is relatively small.
So the failure to find anything in the most likely location is the vacuum that drives all the alternative theories.
Exactly. If the math of fuel exhaustion forces a crash near Howland, but the absence of wreckage suggests otherwise,
then we have to look elsewhere.
Exactly. And that vacuum of evidence leads us 350 nautical miles further down the line of position.
The failure to find wreckage near Howland forces investigators to revisit that final famous line of position, 157337. And that line, if you follow it southeast, leads directly to the core of theory number 2.
The Nicomero hypothesis.
The castaway theory.
And this theory has amassed the most compelling circumstantial evidence in recent decades. It relies on the crucial geographical fact that the 157-337 LOP continues on for hundreds of miles, passing directly through Gardner Island, now called Nicomero.
Which is a remote, uninhabited coral atoll.
Right, but we're talking about 350 nautical miles away from Howland. So how could the Electra possibly cover that distance if they only had, 30 to 90 minutes of fuel left?
This requires a slightly different interpretation of their final actions. Proponents argue that Earhart, being the skilled, experienced pilot she was, realized they had missed Howland and knew that ditching immediately meant sinking.
So instead,
Instead, she committed to flying as efficiently as possible along Noonan's known LOP, knowing that if any land was out there, it would be along that orientation.
she was essentially gliding using minimal power.
Or flying on one engine, burning the final reserves until land appeared on the horizon. And here's the crucial detail. The timing was just fortuitous.
The tides.
At the time of the disappearance, tide conditions at Nikomaro were unusually low, revealing a significant expanse of flat, hard reef surface along the northern shore.
So it was a possible landing strip.
Still dangerous, but a highly skilled pilot could theoretically execute a controlled, wheels-up emergency landing without immediately destroying the aircraft. This gives them a shot at survival.
The primary proponent of this theory is the International Group for Historic Aircraft Recovery, TIGHAR, led by Rick Gillespie. They treat this not as a mystery, but as a systematic archaeological recovery effort.
They've been at it for a long time.
Since 1989, TIGHAR has mounted over a dozen rigorous expeditions, moving this from a fringing theory to a highly detailed forensic investigation. Their approach involves archaeology, historical document review, even sophisticated DNA analysis of potential artifacts.
And their ground research focuses on finding evidence of prolonged human presence that isn't consistent with the established local customs.
This is the evidence from the so-called Seventh Site. TIGHAR discovered remnants of multiple campfires and preparation methods for local fauna, like the remains of seabirds and fish.
In the way the food was prepared and the camp was structured.
It was inconsistent with the methods used by local Kiribati Islanders who occasionally visited. This strongly suggested prolonged habitation by castaways who were unfamiliar with local subsistence techniques.
Implying days, maybe even weeks, of survival.
Right. Now let's discuss the physical and forensic artifacts, because this is what makes the theory so potent. The most compelling, yet also most frustrating piece is the skeletal remains.
The infamous bones.
Yes. In 1940, a British colonial administrator named Gerald Gallagher found skeletal remains and artifacts near that campsite, including a small sextant box and parts of what appeared to be a woman's shoe.
His successor, Eric Bevington, recovered them.
And they were sent to Fiji, where the initial analysis was, let's say, inconclusive.
Correct. A Dr. Hoodless, a forensic pathologist in Fiji, examined the bones and concluded they belonged to a short, stocky male.
And then the bones disappeared, lost to history.
But here is the deep dive insight. Modern forensic anthropology, using advanced statistical methods and machine learning, has re-examined Hoodless's original measurements.
And the conclusion is radically different.
Radically. The 2018 analysis by forensic anthropologist Richard Jantz compared those measurements to Earhart's known physical dimensions, her height, her limb lengths, her build, all well documented.
And Jantz concluded.
He concluded that the remains were more consistent with a female of Earhart's descent and stature than 99% of individuals in a large reference sample.
Wow.
While the interpretation remains debated, it powerfully contradicts that initial 1940 assessment and puts the skeleton right back on the table as a plausible clue.
So beyond the bones, TIGHAR has recovered numerous smaller relics that paint a highly specific picture.
They've recovered glass bottles consistent with 1930s U.S. manufacture, and crucially, they found a small, corroded piece of metal that analysis suggests could be a zipper pull from the era, not generic military or shipping debris.
But the most evocative find for me was a glass jar fragment.
The freckle cream.
Yeah, chemical analysis suggested it was used to contain a specific brand of 1930s freckle cream, and Earhart was known to dislike her freckles and often used such products.
These are not relics of generic survival. They speak to a specific person from a specific time.
But the real clincher for many is the impossibility of the post-loss radio signals. A deep-sea crash can't transmit.
Exactly. If the Nikomaro theory is correct, the plane was intact long enough for the radio to function. TIGHAR meticulously re-examined 120 reported signals heard by listeners across the Pacific.
And even as far as Texas and Florida.
In the days following the disappearance, they determined that approximately 57 of these were credible, based on the frequencies used and the time they were heard.
And the most cited example is that chilling transcript recorded by a 15-year-old girl, Betty Clank, in St. Petersburg, Florida.
Yes. Clank was meticulous. She recorded a transcript of a woman's voice pleading, and I'm quoting, "Water's high, water's knee-deep, let me out, help us quick."
Which is entirely consistent with a damaged aircraft resting precariously on a tidal reef. Water rising and receding.
Maybe using a running engine intermittently to charge the batteries for desperate short transmissions?
And the theory then explains why the signal stopped.
They reportedly ceased after about 1 wink. Tigger correlated this timing with the local tide cycles. The signal stopped precisely when the spring high tides would have reached their peak.
Inundating the reef, submerging the engines, shorting out the electrical system, and ultimately destroying the radio equipment beyond use. The timing is just too coincidental to ignore.
And this brings us to the present moment, the most focused, targeted search attempt in the entire history of this mystery.
The Taria object.
This is why 2025 and 2026 are so pivotal. Satellite imagery, initially spotted in 2020 but traceable in archived aerial photos back to 1938, revealed this unusual, elongated object submerged in the shallow lagoon water of Nikomaro.
And its dimensions, approximately 36 feet long, are consistent with a major section of the Lockheed Electra fuselage.
This is a specific target, not an abstract calculation. And the institution that financed the Electra originally, Purdue University, is now leading the charge.
The Purdue Initiative, announced in October 2025, represents the highest level of academic, institutional, and technological resources ever applied to this theory.
The expedition itself was postponed to 2026 due to weather and logistics, but they're going.
And they plan to use advanced remote-operated vehicles, ROVs, and archaeological diving techniques to definitively examine the Taria object, if they can recover components, or even just get high-resolution video confirming it as the Electra.
Then the mystery is solved, and the castaway theory is proven correct. The momentum is clearly behind the Nikomaro hypothesis right now, driven by the persistent lack of deep-sea wreckage and the targeted nature of this 2026 search.
But despite the powerful evidence supporting Nikomaro, we have to address the final narrative, which taps into the Cold War and pre-WWII geopolitical anxieties.
The Japanese capture theory.
This hypothesis suggests the flight ended not due to accident, but due to intentional capture.
And this shifts the location hundreds of miles west of both Howland and Nikomaro, placing the plane deep inside Japanese-controlled territory.
Precisely. In 1937, Japan controlled the League of Nations, mandated islands, Saipan, Tinian, the Marshall Islands. These areas were heavily fortified military zones, absolutely forbidden to foreigners.
A major intelligence blind spot for the U.S. Navy.
And the tension in the Pacific was palpable. The theory posits that Earhart and Noonan, whether deliberately for reconnaissance or accidentally way off course, were forced down within Japanese waters.
And once captured, they were allegedly interrogated. But why the intense interest?
The Lockheed Electra 10E was revolutionary. It contained that Sperry gyro pilot system, the latest American radio and navigation equipment. Japanese intelligence was known to be keenly interested in acquiring detailed technical specs on advanced U.S. aircraft.
And Earhart, a globally famous figure, would have been considered a key asset.
The more sensational version of the theory claims they were subsequently executed. But why would they take that enormous risk?
Proponents argue that Japan executed them to cover up their presence in the restricted zone and to eliminate witnesses who had seen the fortifications. These claims rely primarily on circumstantial testimony collected decades after the fact.
Can you give us an example of this islander testimony?
Accounts from residents of the Marshall and Mariana Islands surfaced years later. They claimed they saw a silver airplane matching the Electra's description or witnessed a white woman and man being taken into custody by Japanese soldiers.
There's a famous instance, the account from former U.S. Army Sergeant Thomas Devine.
Right, who in 1960 claimed an islander on Saipan showed him an unmarked grave of 2 white people who came from the sky.
It makes for a compelling spy thriller. But how does this hypothesis stand up to scrutiny, especially against the navigational data we discussed earlier?
It fails on several critical points, which our sources really highlight. The first is navigational implausibility. To reach the Marshall Islands, which are hundreds of miles off the Howland-Nikomaro LOP,
Noonan would have had to make a massive, sustained error, hundreds of miles off course, for hours. Given his reputation and experience, even factoring in fatigue and faulty instruments, that magnitude of error is just highly unlikely.
And second, there's the evidentiary challenge regarding Japanese record-keeping.
Right. Japanese military bureaucracy in the 1930s was notoriously meticulous. Every operational detail, every foreign capture, every piece of acquired intelligence was documented.
And there's nothing.
The complete total absence of any declassified or post-war intelligence record confirming the capture, detention, or execution of two global celebrities is extremely suspicious. If they captured the sophisticated Electra for its technology, where is the documentation of its analysis?
The execution claim itself just seems strategically inconsistent for 1937.
Exactly. Why risk provoking an international diplomatic crisis by executing two globally famous Americans years before the start of hostilities? If their value was intelligence, they would have been detained and leveraged.
Executions suggest unnecessary risk for a nation trying to avoid direct conflict with the U.S. in that period.
And the final critical blow to this theory, it comes from the recent declassification.
The 2025 records release.
The presidential order in 2025 released huge tranches of U.S. government records, NSA files, intelligence reports, post-war interrogation transcripts. The goal was to clear the historical archive.
And what did they find?
Critically, these documents contain no evidence whatsoever supporting the Japanese capture theory. Their silence, backed by high-level intelligence review, effectively removes this hypothesis from serious evidence-based contention. It remains a fascinating rumor, but the evidence just does not support it.
So whether the plane rests in the abyss near Howland or under the lagoon at Nikomaro, the pursuit of the answer ensures Amelia Earhart's permanent status as an icon. Her legacy really transcends the details of the accident.
Her influence, particularly on women, it cannot be overstated. She was a deliberate iconoclast. She co-founded the 99s to ensure women had a voice and a network in aviation. She actively broke down conventions, demonstrating that skill and courage were not gender-specific attributes.
She remains relevant because her stories about the courage to challenge institutional limitations. I mean, for women in male-dominated professions today, her example of competence and defiance, it still rings true.
Absolutely. She transformed herself from a daring individual pilot into a global symbol for equality through sheer willpower and documented achievement. Her status as a pioneer in aviation is secure, but her status as a feminist icon is perhaps even more permanent.
But why, 88 years later, does the collective conscience of the world still not have closure? Why do we keep searching?
It's the psychological open loop. Human nature demands narrative finality.
A satisfying ending.
Exactly.
Yeah.
When a life story as ambitious and well-documented as Earhart's ends with such radical ambiguity, it creates a persistent void. And every generation feels compelled to fill that void, projecting their hopes and their own technological advancements onto the mystery.
And 2025 really was the year of a focused cleanup, wasn't it? It gave us a clearer view of the road ahead.
It was. The September 2025 declassification, ordered by President Trump, while not revealing a smoking gun, was a significant historical exercise.
Right.
It confirmed the immense scale and serious intent of the original government search and provided crucial background context. It effectively ended the most wild, unsubstantiated conspiracy theories by confirming they weren't hidden in government vaults.
And the November 2025 technical confirmation was equally important in narrowing the cause of the disaster.
The detailed analysis of the newly released Itasca radio logs repeatedly confirming the status Earhart unheard. It solidified the technical diagnosis of that one-way communication failure.
Okay.
That specific flaw, the inability to receive direction finding, is now a confirmed component of the tragedy. It proves that even a master navigator like Noonan was doomed without that external guidance.
So all of this effort, this cleaning up of the archives, it focuses the world's attention squarely on the next major development.
The 2026 Purdue expedition targeting the Toraya object in Nikomaro.
This is the convergence of everything we've discussed. It moves the investigation entirely away from these massive multi-million-dollar searches of the deep Pacific abyss and into a confined, targeted search in shallow water.
That persistent 36-foot anomaly, visible in images dating back to 1938, it represents our best, most focused opportunity to transition the Nikomaro hypothesis from compelling circumstantial evidence to definitive physical proof.
If the 2026 expedition succeeds, we finally get to close the loop on the question of the wreck's location.
And that would be the biggest aviation breakthrough in nearly a century.
So we've analyzed the facts, the technical vulnerabilities, and the three competing narratives. The paradox remains. The most thoroughly investigated aviation accident in history is still officially unsolved.
And you've got compelling contradictory evidence supporting two narratives: the mathematical probability of the deep-sea crash near Howland,
And the forensic circumstantial evidence supporting the castaway survival on Nikomaro.
Ultimately, whether the final answer lies thousands of feet below the surface or under the shallow turquoise lagoon of Nikumaroro, this entire mystery highlights a profound truth.
And what's that?
The boundlessness of human courage, pitted against the limitations of 1930s technology, the flawed radio antenna, the inexact charts, the unforgiving fuel calculations. Earhart and Noonan pushed the edge of the envelope until the envelope failed.
We are 88 years on, equipped with satellite mapping, advanced sonar, DNA forensics, and massive political will to release records, yet the definitive proof remains elusive.
It's incredible.
Our analysis here at the Urban Herald suggests the scheduled 2026 Purdue expedition to investigate the Taraya object isn't just a hope, but the single most strategically advantageous chance we have left to solve this mystery.
And here's the final thought we'll leave with you to consider. If that object is definitively confirmed as the Electra, it solves the immediate mystery of the wreckage location, confirming the Nikumaroro theory. But the question then shifts immediately. What new granular evidence will that wreckage and the surrounding archaeological site then reveal about the final unknown week of Earhart and Noonan's lives? Survival is one thing, but the intimate, agonizing details of their ultimate fate remain the deepest part of this captivating puzzle.